This is the legend of McBlott, the Black Scot. People say he came on board a slave ship. Others say he was a mutineer or a deserter from the Royal Navy. But say what you will, he came as a plague upon the land. Some say he came with no name, but was just referred to as a blot. And therefore in a Scottish land he was called McBlott. At first he was unsure of himself and needed the help of others. He worked hard and became the very definition of labor. The weather was not kind. Summers were hot and humid, and winters were cruel and cold, for he lived in a shack, where he lived as closely with her as he did from whence he had come, among the fields in which he toiled. Skin was darkened by the sun and leathered by the elements, and the insects that preyed upon him. He worked all days, and when the sun went down one could hear him singing and playing his music that echoed among the forests that lined the fields that had escaped the butcher's axe. McBlott worked like none among them, bowing to their whips and chains that society had placed upon him. "Nah, you're not one of us," the old folks said, and they were right. They had forgotten that they were once among the natives of their strange land. They, too, were cruel and greedy, which led them to take what they wanted and ask not. The people had no concept of ownership, for there was enough for all, and if a dispute arose among them, there were councils and even wars to settle accounts, for it had been said that no one could own the land, nor the sky, nor the water. But soon they came to claim it, all for the work they had done, bringing ways with them to change the water to the power, and even winds into lightning. The lands were cleared to plant crops, and they were gathered and sold to others far, far away. They sold much to lands in the north and even across the big water, and brought others to work for them, as they were fair and withered in the heat that made the land so plentiful. They dug holes in their mother and burnt her entrails to forge weapons and plowshares and other strange machines by which they kept their possession of the land. As for McBlott, the sweetness of his labor pleased him. His life was more comfortable physically there than in the lowlands from which he came, where the animals were his friends, and for whose souls he prayed before he took them to keep for himself. He knew the same had been for people before him, who blamed the aggressor nations on themselves for not having asked the soul of the tree to take her before they fashioned a canoe out of her body, upon which they would ride to catch citizens of the waters, to suffocate and eat. For that they had brought it all upon themselves, and would now suffer for untold generations for that mistake. Woe be unto them all, for they have raped the earth and poisoned the water and fouled the air. McBlott deserved his name by keeping tradition alive. People began to forget who they were and the promises that brought them to this new land. Each generation remembered less and less, and soon they became prideful and filled with hatred of each other because of envy and fear. McBlott saw this and emulated those around him. For every meal he ate, he demanded another. For every acre he owned, he demanded another. Soon his eyes filled with liberty, and he gazed upon others' women and their possessions, but he had forgotten the power of those around him and how greedy they were. For not one would ever allow this stranger among them to become one of them. But they never opened the golden door, for they had enough and wanted no others to have what they did. McBlott began to rob what was his. He took the excesses and squandered them. The things that his master did not need, he took and sold back to them, and they had no controls on trade, and their police even feared McBlott and let him grow bolder and bolder. And one day, McBlott saw a woman he desired, and he took her. The people did nothing, for they feared McBlott's tantrums and his muscular hand that could break and burn all around him when he was displeased. More and more, he too was taken by greed that he had learned. They were not wanting me to be like them, he asked himself. He took more and more while those above him stuck in their own promises and without gods to contain him let him rise. His children, neither of him nor another, now roam the streets and the byways. They became wild, knowing they were protected by McBlott and the fathers, pleasing neither. They became wild, knowing they were protected by McBlott and the fathers, pleasing neither. They too took women and multiplied, not knowing which way to go, now that they too littered the land. The fathers used more machines to replace the unruly clans, and born of right, they had no work to do and turned to pleasure as their reward. People came to understand that they were a blot upon the land, and his name was justified. They had come to take what they could, becoming thieves of man and God. Nothing was sacred. Not the land, nor the animals upon it, nor the trees, nor the lakes, nor the rivers, nor the fish, nor the air, nor the birds, nor insects, had all lived in balance before man. They all became as gods and needed not a higher one. The mills closed, the machines stopped spinning. They all gazed in wonder at the new technology that was designed to keep everyone stare at a more perfect world of light and movement. They became friends of everyone and none. They knew everything and nothing. They took what was given them and demanded more. They forgot about the weather and how to live in it. They knew only wheels and cool air and the efforts of others that, like magic, appeared on their tables. They forgot to be men and women and the lessons that it taught. Their heads were elsewhere. But one can imagine they began to wander in search of another place to spoil and pillage. They sought excitement and pleasure and an easier way of doing things, but soon, as you can imagine, they became too soft and lost even the desire to live. To buy, to move, to gaze, to feel the power given them led others to seek the same. And then there were wars and hatred from fear. Tradition couldn't save them, nor heritage, nor laws. nor money, because everything was worth the same and therefore worthless. McBlott and others like him killed all there was through weakness, and the greatness of the land was exhausted. McBlott, the black Scot. Huh?